I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to begin with a moment of silence and like for us to remember the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Roll call, begin with Commissioner Culbertson.
Here.
Commissioner Smith, President. Commissioner SCHIMKE.
Here.
Commissioner Stevens. Sorry. And Commissioner KAAZ.
Here.
All right. Get y'all them moments already. I just had one of the moments. Okay, we have no public comment today. Do we have any administrative business this time, Mr. LOUGHRY?
Just a couple things. One, the CARES Act Relief Fund Committee that the board approved earlier this year will be meeting this afternoon to review some expenditures that have come in, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that they either meet or don't meet what we believe are the requirements. We'll be meeting at 1:30 to review those. And then next week you'll have before you a policy and process on the grant application for funds from the human service sector. And then just touching base, I sent you all an email, but wanted to bring it up today that last week did have two meetings with the recovery team and with the, we're in District 8, the district representative. They have reviewed our plan, and they signed off on it with one change, and that is that they did not believe that the funding for the historical societies that we had carved out met the requirements and the needs of the CARES Act relief funds. So those were moved over to the human services side for the time being, unless the board wants to reallocate those some other way. But with that change, they signed off on it, and so we will be submitting now payments to the board for their approval so we can start distributing funds. You may recall that we were not allowed to distribute any funds until we received that approval from the state.
Correct.
Mark, I was going to wait to the end on just updates attending the fire district meeting this week, but remind me, what are the dates of, what are the current deadlines given that, even
right.
last week the forms changed and
yep.
our requirements
yep.
changed, which is beyond laughable.
Yeah. So that is something that I was going to talk to the committee about today, actually, but can bring that up now, and that I believe that we probably need to move those, what we originally set for deadlines, back because the state, again, just came out last week with our approval. So, and you'll see in the policy I had moved what was originally like an October 1st deadline to November 1st. So that will be something that I'll talk to the committee about this afternoon, and we'll likely ask the board to maybe amend some of those deadlines as well. I think from the county's perspective, now that we have a better understanding of the funds and how it's going to work, I think that the one hard deadline that we have to have is just the December 15th, and I need to look at where that falls on the calendar, if it's a weekend or not, but that's the deadline that we have to have everything spent in order for us to have time to reallocate leftover funds if there are any. So by December 30th, everything has to be basically out of our account and spent, or it has to be sent back to the state on that date. So by the December 15th, if all outside agency requests, anybody that's not in a county department, if we don't have that to them by that date, we're not likely to hit that 30th. So to get them their checks by the 15th, to me, December 1st is the absolute drop dead. If we don't have your request by December 1st, then you're not getting it. Okay. Otherwise, we stand the risk of having to send it back to the state.
You don't see that date changing?
Now, the end of the year is pretty hard and fast. That's the only one that hasn't changed is it has to be, all the money has to be spent by the end of the year. That date has not changed. The state's moved some other things around, but that's
Yeah,
the
I know
federal.
it moved some other dates, that's why I was
Yeah,
wondering.
that's
if
the
that
federal
changed.
guideline, though, and only the federal, only the Treasury and the Senate and House can change that date. I don't see that changing right now, but I think we need to operate that December 1st would be the absolute. I'd like to get it done before then, but I understand
Right.
with all the changes the state's made, we need to be a little more flexible with some of those deadlines.
Question on the, Commissioner Culbertson and I are dealing
Yeah.
with the October 1st deadline.
Yeah.
That would come before we could act. Is that something we
That's
could?
one of the ones I want to talk to the committee about, and I think in the policy that I have for the board for next week, I put November 1st as the deadline, just so we can get those applications in. And those are grant applications. They're a little bit different than the other taxing entities, because the other taxing entities, we have money that's set aside that they have to submit actual receipts for to be reimbursed. For the grant process, that's for the like the human services fields. They have to ask for the funds. They don't have to submit the receipts to get those funds. They just have to show the need, right? Whereas like a Linwood or an Easton, they have to submit receipts that they've had that expenditure or that they need us to reimburse a vendor for an expenditure. So it's a little different for them.
So if we're visiting with them, can we tell them we're likely going to move the date back a little bit?
Well, only the board can make that decision, but I think that's one that we'll be recommending.
What about the city offering grants to local businesses? There wouldn't be receipts for that.
Well, they have to have the plan, and then there would be that business has to make an application, right? So next week you'll approve our grant application process. The city has to have a similar thing for those businesses. They can't just go write a check. There has to be an application. The business has to make application to the city. In that application, they have to state why they have experienced a loss due to COVID, and then the city can provide them the grant. But it's pretty straightforward. It's not like a 55-page federal grant. It's basically a memo that says this is what's happened. So,
But no receipts situation.
and something like that, there wouldn't be a receipt. There'd be an application for the funds.
Gotcha.
So, and then they would obviously need to approve that grant process first, and then the application would come in.
And you said approval would be in terms of passing an ordinance by the city government.
That would be the grant process. They would need to
Right.
approve a grant process. Just like next week, I'm going to bring that to you. They need to take that to their board for approval, and then the businesses would make application directly to them. And several of the cities have implemented programs like that. So there are some.
Well, should we?
And I think a lot of them are using October 1st because that's been.
That's what we started out with, because we've assumed that the state would have our approval back to us before the 1st of this month instead of last week.
Well, can we, as a group, like right now, back it up to the 15th or something? Since we won't meet
Well,
again
next week's
before the
still
first.
before the 1st.
Yeah, next week's before the
Next
1st.
week's 30th.
Yes.
I
So,
thought the 30th was on the Tuesday.
Nope.
I'm just going off if today's the 23rd.
Calendar.
Should
right,
be
yeah,
okay.
there
Yeah.
should be 7 days between them.
All right.
So,
Well, I'm just thinking of how
Right.
to get this through the city council.
yeah, I obviously, the board, this is a policy decision the board can make. You all could pick November 1st right now. I support that. That's, again, what I'm going to
Might
ask
as
for
well do
next
it now.
week.
Well, why not?
easier.
Then when they know. Is that all right with you guys?
That's all right with me. We're not going to do anything to hurt the cities. I know that.
You want to make the
So I'll
motion?
make a motion we move that date to November 1st.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on extending the deadline for applications? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
Thank you.
But then just to reiterate, but we're still talking about, from a allocation or issuance perspective, December 1st being the absolute drop dead date.
Those are, so that's the last, to me, that's the last day they can submit for reimbursement, right? So there's the money, like for Linwood and Easton, the money's set aside already. I mean, we have money set aside.
Right.
And Lansing and Tonganoxie, all of them. The money's set aside. So they're submitting reimbursements. They're going to have longer to get that to us because the money's already set aside. The November 1st is more for the grant applications, like the outside agencies, those kinds of things. That's what that November 1st deadline is, because that's going to take a little more processing, one. And two, we need to know in advance so we can reallocate those funds whereas the other ones are set aside specifically for these communities. So that's why I say December 1st, and that's probably pushing it, and we've had a little trouble getting people to submit in the format they're supposed to submit and the documentation they're supposed to submit. And then when our staff has reached back out to them, we still don't always get the information we need. So that's again why the more deadline, the more advanced we can have that deadline, the better. But I also understand this is a work in progress, and when the state slides some of the deadlines back, we need to be flexible and allow these other entities to have a little more time too.
Any other administrative business?
I think that was it.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Everybody had a chance to look at all the items on the consent agenda. Does anything need to be pulled off the consent agenda and voted on separately?
This is Commissioner KAAZ. We need to remove the check registry from the consent agenda, please.
Okay.
I move we approve the consent agenda minus the check registry as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second on the consent agenda. Any discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 And I make a
Commissioner KAAZ votes aye.
Thank
And I
you.
make a motion we approve the check registry part of the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the approval of the check registry. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner KAAZ abstains.
All right. Thank you. All right. We're ready to consider to designate a voting delegate and two alternates for the Kansas Association of Counties virtual conference this year. Is everyone going to attend the virtual conference this year?
This is Commissioner KAAZ. I'll attend.
Okay. I plan on sitting at the computer that day.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. It's just the one day, isn't it?
What's the registration?
I think they have 2 days actually.
Is it 2 days?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I plan on attending multiple sessions. I'm not going to commit to 16 hours of.
Well,
Yeah.
voting's in the morning. So, does anyone have interest in being a voting delegate?
Is there any specific thing that's going to be voted upon that we know of?
Well, you'll get your credentials, I guess, before and find out everything. Yeah, there's always something to vote on.
I just didn't know if there's
KAAZ's
Things specific.
lobbies for a lot of things.
Yeah, last year was a lot of home rule.
I plan to listen in, but I don't.
Okay. Well, I've done it for the last 3 years.
Yeah, I can do it if you
No,
want.
I did it last year.
Oh, you did it. That's correct. That's right. You did do it last year. Are you interested in doing it again this year, Commissioner KAAZ?
I can if
I was
you
an
don't want
alternate
to.
last year. Yeah. Okay. You have any?
I can be an alternate. I'm going
All
to try
right.
to get that Eastern Gateway thing going, so that's going to probably take a lot of time.
Okay. So is anyone else interested in being an alternate voting delegate? Mr. Schimke?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. Very good. That's right. I forgot. All right. Then I'll entertain a motion to approve that.
I move that the delegate appointed to the Kansas Association of Counties for Leavenworth County will be Commissioner KAAZ. Alternate delegates will be Commissioner Culbertson and Commissioner Schimke.
Second.
Got a motion second. Any further discussion? Voting.
Aye.
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 So
Commissioner
now,
KAAZ votes aye.
now we're all going to have to register for this conference if we're all going to
Becky
participate.
You have to, if you'll let Becky know, she can fill out the paperwork, or you can register yourself. Either way.
Okay.
Obviously, if you are a voting delegate or an alternate, you probably need to be registered for the conference. So,
That would make sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're ready for juvenile services. Lee, is it for the carryover?
Oh.
Rhonda?
You confused me.
Commissioners, while they're coming up, also good opportunity for you all. If you haven't met, the new director for community corrections, Jamie, is here. And if you want to take a few minutes to introduce yourselves, or if she wants to introduce herself, that would be a good time to do it since this is her first meeting.
Well, I'm Doug Smith. I'm chairman. Normally we would have met in person, but with the COVID, we just don't bounce from office to office. I just want to thank you for accepting the position to come to work for Leavenworth County. I think what I've read about you, you're very qualified, and we're just glad to have you aboard. And this is Commissioner Chad SCHIMKE.
Morning.
And then we got Commissioner Mike Stevens and Commissioner
Welcome to God's country.
Commissioner Jeff Culbertson, and then we have Commissioner Vicky KAAZ by phone, and I'm sure you've met her already.
Over the phone.
Through the phone. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Well, welcome.
welcome aboard. So,
And Rhonda, good morning.
and Rhonda, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Commissioner.
That's good.
morning.
All right.
I don't think we've scared her off yet.
I hope not.
Good.
I hope not.
There's still some days left of the week. But,
Yeah.
Commissioners, what you have in front of you is the carryover reimbursement budget for the adult and the juvenile funds. These are funds that are cumulative over the years of program fees or UA payments made from the contracting agencies that we complete UAs for. KDOC requires us to submit a budget. If we were to spend those funds, how would we? This is not money that has to be spent. It's just a plan in case we did, what we would allocate it for. The first one is the adult budget. The total is $26,545.16. Some of the items that are budgeted on there are for the liability insurance on our county car, our share of that, registration or costs for training, the FirstNet cell phones that the staff now has. These phones we purchased right before the shutdown for two reasons. First of all, it was a money saver because instead of paying the staff the phone stipend each month, this is actually half the cost for each staff to have a cell phone. With that cell phone, we gained a hotspot so that working from home, they didn't have to use their personal data. They could use the data off this phone. Especially like me out in a rural area, my coverage is not that great anyway. So they were able to use that. The phones are more secure, so we have county emails on there. They don't have to use their personal phones for the county emails. It was just all around better fit, we thought, for security-wise and cost-wise for the office. So the FirstNet cell phones, we pay half. The juvenile budget, of course, would pay the other half. We also purchased a new copier this year. The adult and the juvenile both split that cost. And it's a lot faster, and we're a lot more excited about that copier. We also, if you remember the behavioral health grant that was before you before, that money was cut, and we only got $3,000 for that. We've allocated money in the reimbursement budget to cover some of those costs on assessments or treatment for our clients that we may not be able to cover with our cuts to the behavioral health grant. We also have included things like transportation assistance, housing assistance, such as like gas cards, deposits for housing, things like that. And then gift cards for client incentives, kind of a, hey, way to go, you've got your GED, or you've had, you're doing well on probation, just kind of incentives to keep them doing a good thing. So that's for the adult budget. I just need an approval from the board on that, and then this is due to the state October 1st, so we'll submit it next week with your approval.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Rhonda or Jamie?
Just one that's not really totally related to this, but how many juveniles are we seeing in the program right like today?
We have a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, there are probably half in facilities.
I believe it's like 23, but that was last week. Things change.
Okay.
And this is the adult budget that you're voting on first.
Right. I just, when I hadn't had a report for a while, and I know we had talked about, they talked about moving some of them over to Wyandotte.
I think there's a difference. What they are is community corrections. So
Right.
these are kids who are on
Corrections.
probation, parole type stuff.
Okay, so I'm getting
The
two
Right.
programs confused.
the actual detention facility is the one.
That's the one
that
we're
we're.
moving.
Yeah, they moved.
Okay.
They had one person in there, and they moved them over to Wyandotte County because they had to close down for some COVID issues for a while. But it is reopened back over there. I don't know if they have anybody actually in the facility or not, though.
Yeah, you're correct.
Any other questions? Then I'll entertain a motion to authorize the chairperson to sign the carryover reimbursement.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the carryover? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
Thank you.
Commissioners, the second reimbursement budget is for the juvenile. There are two. There's one for Leavenworth County and one for Atchison County. As you remember, the juvenile is the first district, so it covers both counties. Leavenworth County's budget is an amount of $8,280.54. Part of that budget is under salary. We paid out some of the annual leave to a staff that has left our agency. Also, car insurance, registration for trainings, the cell phones, the copier, basically the same thing, the evaluations, the assessments, the treatment for the clients, and the drug tests and supplies for that. Atchison County, their budget, what did I just do with that? Oh, so sorry. Actually, I apologize. I had those reversed. The first one was for the juvenile, and there's my Atchison County. Atchison County is $19,512.03. Atchison County plans on purchasing some computers, a security camera, a scanner, supplies for drug testing, confirmations from lab for drug tests, and setting up housing assistance, substances, things for their clients. So Atchison County is $19,512.03 for their part.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on the juvenile services carryover? Then I'll entertain a motion to authorize the chairperson to sign the juvenile carryover.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the carryover? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cobb votes aye.
All right. Thank you.
I would also like to inform the board that we did have a resignation from the Juvenile Advisory Board. The member has moved to Douglas County, which made them ineligible to be representing Leavenworth County. So we will be putting out the application process to
Okay.
replace that position on the Juvenile Board. Also in front of you today is the Community Corrections year-end report. This is a report that focuses on the goals of the comp plan that was submitted for fiscal year 2020. Quarterly, this report is sent to KDOC. At the end of the year, it is brought before the board. It's finalization of what the agency has accomplished with those goals for the year. It's a lengthy report. I think you all were given this. If you have any questions about it, I don't want to waste time. I mean, we'd be here for a while if I went through all of it with you, but if you have any questions about it, I can try to answer them. As you saw in the fourth quarter, a lot of our services were affected by COVID because a lot of things were shut
Right.
down. So there wasn't a lot of activity in the fourth quarter.
It's attached to the, actually the adult services one, and it does not take action. It's just information only.
Right.
I believe it doesn't read. Oh, it does need Doug's signature.
It does need the
Okay,
signature
well, then you
from
will
the
have
board.
to vote to allow Doug to.
Yeah. And it's just for the adult comp plan. It does not. There's not one required for the juvenile.
So we do need a motion to approve the comp plan.
Well, it's the year-end outcome
Year-end.
report.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions on this? On the outcome report? Outcome goals, I guess we'll call it.
I don't necessarily have a question. If I did, I was just going to ask, Jamie being new, not to put you on the spot, early thoughts, lessons learned, that can be both good, bad.
I'm catching up on both of the comp plans that were submitted for this year. In the coming weeks, there are some changes I would like to see made so that we can hit goals and get back to the basics of some of the items that I believe should have been more of a priority.
Okay.
That's kind of a stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. To be continued.
That's totally fair.
Yes, and whenever we'll get back to normal when COVID gets over.
Now, I'm trying to remember, and I have not thoroughly studied this document, but in the past, the community corrections, one thing they had touched on was financial planning, training, that kind of thing. Is that something you anticipate still working with them on?
Absolutely. And leadership training, there's a lot of training that I believe we would all benefit from as an agency.
I know they had the Financial Peace University or some financial program that they had gone through, and
Yeah.
that's really good information for.
Are you referring to the JCAP grant that was?
I think that's what she put together, the former director.
Right.
Yeah.
That was on the juvenile side, and it was for a day reporting center. And when they're not being caught up on their school work because they've been suspended or whatever from school, they would also possibly learn some life skills such as financial, how do you prepare a meal, basic life skills. How do you interview for a job? How do you fill out an application? Things like that. That grant was $146,000 something, and we are in the process of still trying to get that going. Location is our main.
That's a good
obstacle.
thing. I think that's really good
have a-
things for them to learn.
They have a lot of good programs. I can't remember all the acronyms for all of them.
There's a lot of acronyms in your report.
But, I think the best one is was it Moral Act?
The
Moral recognition.
There you go. Yeah.
What does TOAD stand for? I know that's one of the acronyms. TOAD.
Total Offender Access Database.
Yeah.
TOAD. There you go.
And that will be
If you
training.
remember
That will
all the
be changing.
acronyms, you'll know how they're
We'll
part
get used to that one. It'll be Athena soon.
Okay.
Athena.
They're changing programs. So
Well,
It's like the military.
it's hard to keep track of all of these things, but
Yeah.
we really appreciate all you're doing.
Absolutely. Any other questions? And I'll entertain a motion to approve the quarterly and year-end outcome report.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner KAAZ votes aye.
And while you're over here, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Rhonda and the staff over there for stepping up and covering everything while we were in search of a new director. And also welcome Jamie aboard and look forward to working with you.
Thank you for the opportunity, all of you. It's something I look forward to, and the best part about it is you do have a great staff of people who were knowledgeable and hardworking and holding down the fort. So.
That's good.
Well said, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully this is the last time you need to see me.
I think
It's not that bad.
I think that
We always look forward to seeing you, Rhonda.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
Rhonda. Well,
Feel free. Our door is always open. You can
Yep.
always talk to any of us.
All right. Thank you.
you need them signed right now,
I
Ron?
sure do.
Okay. Let's get them signed.
And
May the 23rd.
Be sure to give Glenn our best. Don't see him very much.
I see him drive by. I'll make calls up. There's two here. One more. I get it? All right.
Have a great day.
Take care, Ron.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have, commissioners, do we have any more business for us on this? Commissioners have anything to report on?
We're working on the application for the smaller cities.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds like we got plenty of time.
Well, so to follow up, so attended the fire district meeting on Monday, and one of their requests of us was, and I'm sure there's other governmental agencies that have done the same, is everybody wants direction. And I realize that when it comes to CARES funding, the state's been clear as mud as well. So I understand everyone's frustration there. I think what Fire District 1 is requesting or would like for us is some type of confirmation or maybe summary that says, here's the position Leavenworth County has taken specific to our first responders, and here's what a Leavenworth or a Lansing or pick another governmental agency, whether it's police, fire, you name it. Again, I'm focusing more on first responders because it was my understanding that most everybody, and I think this is coming from state guidance, is taking compensation of all of those individuals for a much larger period of time, given the impact of COVID than just during a shutdown, for example. So I think they're looking for some guidance, and I know we've been hesitant, I think in general, and I guess I'm looking for Mark here to help me help them or figure out the best way to communicate the position we've all taken, both, again, our EMS, Sheriff's Office, Health Department, and again, how we're working with the cities and what they're doing. And then, Fire District 1's leaning on us to say, is there more they can or should be doing versus maybe what some of their early understandings were of what was released or written. Because, again, I shared with them, I said, guys, the forms changed last week. I was given, my purview on even the, PPP approach that they took and how it went from 8 weeks to 12 weeks, and it's been, ever flowing to the point where there's still businesses out there not knowing what to do for the loan forgiveness still today. And I go, this is like the blind leading the blind, honestly. And I said, if you're frustrated with the county, you should definitely call the state. See how that goes.
yeah,
Are the businesses, are they working through LCDC or anything? Or are they able to give any assistance on that?
Well, no, I would direct all businesses to probably get with their lender first, but before the LCDC, but specifically the fire district here's what they're really requesting. We'd love for Mark to send us an email and tell us what to do. And I go, well, that's probably not happening.
Yeah, one, I
But
mean,
we can strongly make recommendations, or at least share what we are doing relative to our first responder staff, and it's probably a good assumption to make that they should follow a similar plan, because we're not going to do anything that we don't think qualifies for reimbursement. And I think there are cities out there, I mean, again, whether it's Linwood or Easton or anybody else going, okay, what's the county doing with the money? And if the county isn't giving us some stewardship or guidance, how are we missing out, or what are we missing out on? And I know the county's position is, hey, we don't want to do anything that we're not fully confident will be reimbursed, because otherwise we allocate the funds and we're on the hook for it, not the ones we allocated it to or who spent it.
So, first and foremost, I think everybody just needs to make sure they understand the purpose of the CARES Act relief funds are to offset costs associated with COVID-19, specifically for taxing entities. It's not a windfall. It's not money that we just get and we can spend it however. So the very first thing is, when they're doing their expenditures, they need to say, is this an expenditure that I have to make due to a response to COVID-19? If they can answer yes to that, then it's an allowed expenditure, 100%, not a problem. Then there's some expenditures that are probably maybe a little more of a gray area, in that we need to make this expenditure so we can respond in the future to this type of an outbreak or something. Those are also allowed, but you have to be a little bit more careful on documentation. One thing we've said all along is be very, very careful about submitting wages, because that is the one that it's the hardest to justify, because you have to, if it's not a first responder specifically, you have to justify and be able to document and show that the work that person did was, one, outside the normal scope of their job, two, it wasn't budgeted, and three, it is directly related to COVID-19. So things like when we had to put some staff on leave, either for quarantine or because we had to close an office, that's an allowed expenditure. We can reimburse that. Some of the other items that came up, though, if it's not clear and definitive, we're just setting it aside, saying nope, that was part of our budget. We're going to go ahead and allow that. Now, the U.S. government, the Treasury Office, said, for clarification's purposes, all first responders it can be assumed that their job changed enough that you can utilize them for their wages to be reimbursed.
For what period?
From March 15th through the end of the year. That's the
Which
U.S.
is the entirety of Fire District 1.
Right. So that's the U.S. Treasury. The state has said no. They interpret it to say that you still have to be able to say that it was a COVID-related issue. So that's one of the challenges we face, is that the state's telling us they don't, I can read the federal guidance. It's very clear to me that it says all first responders. But when I meet with the recovery office and our local representative for our district specifically and ask them those questions, they say no. They believe there's the second part of that guidance that says you have to justify that it was COVID related. So my approach is that the U.S. Treasury's guidance is clear and it says first responders. So there you go. That's what we're going with. I believe that
Could it be possible, I know this sounds like a really out there idea, that the state is putting stipulations so that counties and local governments would have to give funding back to the state, and the state has no intention of giving it back to the feds?
Well, I wouldn't want to go so far as to say that that's for sure happening, but
that's what's happening.
I do think that in this case, it's so clear what the federal government has said. I don't understand why the state is taking any stance.
I want everyone to know that the state is telling us what we should do with the money the federal government has allocated to the counties and local governments. So the state's taking a position of how to spend money that isn't theirs so that they get it back with the intent
That's how I explain
to
it.
use it internally. I mean, that is the deal.
And that may be some motivation on why some of the rules have changed. I can't speak to that because I don't know what the state's thinking on all of them. But I would tell you that first responders, it's very clear from the U.S. Treasury that first responders are covered. Now, here's the thing that I think that like Fire District 1 needs to be careful about. And I just received an email this morning from their interim chief. We're going to talk tomorrow, so hopefully we can clear some of this up. But just because you have those expenses doesn't mean the money's available to reimburse you. I mean, I don't know what their payroll is for Fire District 1, and I don't know what the payroll from March 15th through the end of the year would be.
$1.2 million budget, and probably makes up 80-90% of it.
So
let me ask you
I will
this
tell
way.
you that there is not $800,000 set aside for Fire District 1. It doesn't exist. So
I realize that.
we'll get them what we can, obviously, what's allocated and available, we'll get them. But there's not, just like there's not enough money probably for in the city of Leavenworth to pay the wages for their first responders from March 15th through the end of the year, and they received $6 million, and I doubt that's enough. So, number one, use the funds for easily identifiable COVID-related expenditures. Use that as much as possible. The PPE, the sanitation products, those kind of things, the leave that you had to pay for people who had to be off because of it, the EFMLA, the extended FMLA leave that the federal government implemented. Those things are absolutely allowable, really easy to justify. Number one, that's the first place. That's what we're doing. The improvements to the facilities, easy to justify. We're allocating as much to that as available. What's left then is going to go towards first responder wages. Now, what they have to be really careful about is there's multiple sources of funding available, maybe not for Fire District 1, but for like the county and probably the cities too. We've made application for funds that are outside of the CARES Act relief funds. I can't double dip. I have to make sure that if a portion of, let's say, the health office's wages are being reimbursed from another federal grant or any grant, that I don't also submit those to the CARES Act relief funds. That's where the tracking becomes an issue. Early on, and this just changed last week, school districts, for instance, it was very difficult for them to allocate any wages towards CARES Act relief funds. The wording was so specific that they may have been able to get one or two people. Last week, the federal government changed the rules, I guess, and so the state changed the rules that said as long as they don't spend more than $500 per student, we don't care about them itemizing their expenditures. They just need to group it into what group it is. So they don't even have to provide documentation anymore on what the expenditures were for. They just have to say it was for one of these 5 categories. That makes our job a lot easier as far as tracking and submitting, makes the school district's job a lot easier, but I don't understand why they wouldn't have done that for all of the taxing entities, why it was only the schools that get that pass. So, not that I begrudge them, I'm glad they did it because a lot of the money is going to the schools and again makes our job easier, but I don't know why they couldn't have just taken that approach for all of the entities.
But the 2 counties that received their funding directly from the federal government don't have to go through all this.
They don't have any of this to worry about.
Right.
No, they don't have. They have probably already spent most of their money, put programs in place, and weren't waiting for the state to approve any of it.
Was it only
Johnson
2 out of the top 5?
Yeah, Johnson and Sedgwick. You had to have over 500,000 population in your
Only
county.
2. Okay.
So
Yeah, Wyandotte didn't. It was.
Yeah.
So, a question I had, and we visited about this, but like the historical societies, one of the things they said was you can't be reimbursed for loss of revenue.
right.
And would that also be true? We talked about the community centers that were closed. That would be loss of revenue.
Yep.
So that's not applicable. Swimming pool that was closed, loss of revenue, not
Yep.
applicable.
Yep.
Now, in any of those cases, swimming pool, community center, historical societies, if they were going to be making the facility COVID-19 compliant, say entrances, egress that is safe,
Yep.
those would be now expenditures that could be applied for, correct?
Yes. Yeah, again, if it's clearly a COVID-related issue, like a facility improvement to deal with this, then yes, that would be again, they have to have them spent by the end of the year. So by December 30th, for us, we have to show that all the money has been spent, not allocated, but spent.
It's just amazing that whether for-profit or non-for-profit, there's never been a consideration for lost revenue, but all of the expenses have been there. And now they're trying to say it's expenses relative to COVID. Well, guess what? Rent for all of those entities is a hell of a lot more than gloves and masks.
Right.
So no consideration for loss of revenue, but no belief in the expense side, unless, again, if you're for-profit and you went down the...
For-profit. Yeah, and cities can set up grant programs that would be for-profit agencies would be able to show an impact due to COVID. That would include lost revenue, I believe. But taxing entities and nonprofits were not granted that same benefit.
And you said early on the federal guidelines were allowed, like the application for the Historical Society, the federal guidelines early on looked like they were going to accept this, and then the state of Kansas put further restrictions.
Yeah, so the federal guidance was iffy. It talked about for-profit, but it didn't exclude not-for-profit. So the early guidance was it looks like nonprofits are going to be able to utilize it for lost revenue as well. And then the state, a month and a half ago, said they flipped back and forth. One day it was yes, you could, or actually one day it was no, you can't. The next day it was yes, you could. But they've brought on a new team. The first part of this month, probably this, maybe the 10th of the month, they brought on a new team that's overseeing all the recovery funds.
What happened to the old team? Did they kill them?
They're still there. They just are working in the office, I guess, more. I don't know. But this
Probably
new
on sabbatical. Paid leave, probably.
This new team's very clear
Retired.
that is not an allowable reimbursement, not for lost revenue.
It is just unfathomable to me. They're deciding how to spend money that isn't theirs.
And my question mark is, does the federal government require the state to give back any money?
The state has to give back any money that's not spent, which is why December 30th we have to get the money to the state. So on December 31st, they can reallocate anything that's left over.
But did the federal government put guidelines that the state has to show that all that money, say we have to turn back $1 million to the state because we couldn't justify what we spent it on, then does the state have to justify that they spent that $1 million on something?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
The state is the one entity that it was for sure going to get audited by the federal government.
But I'm guessing the state doesn't have to comply to the mandate they're putting on the county. So,
Yeah,
for
they're
example, if
different.
the Treasury
Yeah,
says
they're different rules.
all first responders, I'm guessing.
They can get rid of
Yeah, why weren't the
fast.
rules passed straight down from the federal guidelines? I don't
Right.
understand that.
Well, and the second round of CARES funding that the federal government's been debating for several months here, one of the stipulations is in there that states can't put any additional restrictions over and above what the federal government has placed on them. But they haven't passed that because they're stuck it's stuck in limbo probably because of the election. But the second round of CARES relief funding, that stipulation is in there. It hasn't moved out of the Senate or the House. So clearly they've noticed that it's a problem. And at one point in time, Kansas was at like the low end of the bottom 10% of states that had distributed their funds after they received them. So they were like one of the slowest states to actually get the money out to the counties. And again, none of these restrictions are on Johnson or Sedgwick County. They're allowed to just follow the Treasury's guidance, and they don't have to call the recovery office and get approval and all that other stuff. So
The state's not allowed to earn interest on this money, correct?
that is one thing that came out, and they can earn interest. Yes.
They can earn interest.
Yes, they can earn interest.
Okay.
So
So these
Good
rules
math,
are being
Chad.
made administratively from the state level. There's no legislative group that's in control of any of this.
there is a legislative group, but the legislative group passed their rules on how this is going to work, and it's the budget team that's made up of senators and representatives that they get the final oversight over the recovery office. So the recovery office actually reports to them. So any of this goes to them. It's approved. It comes back.
But the
Now,
recovery
I don't
office-
want to. I won't mention any names, but the one meeting that I listened in on that was the combined group. One of the representatives from Johnson County didn't want to give any of the money to the counties. Wanted the state to hold all of it. Wanted us to have to submit only reimbursements, and then that a much smaller percentage of what was allocated. They didn't want to do the population thing, which I found ironic given they got their money straight from the federal government.
Right. Shouldn't even been on the committee.
He wanted to keep the money at the state level to put into programs at the state. So there you go. If you ask, is there motivation for the state to keep the money? Yes, there is. Is there motivation for them to make it hard on us to spend it? Probably. But I'm just glad we have it. We have a program in place on how to spend it. We will spend it the right way. We'll make sure we follow all the rules, regardless of who made those rules. We do not want to get sideways with anyone.
Before the rabbit hole I took us down, so you do already have time with Chief Gates?
He emailed me this morning. I told him today's not going to work, but tomorrow, so we're going to try to touch base tomorrow.
Okay.
Anything else to report on? Well, I attended the MARC Budget and Personnel by Zoom and also the Board of Directors meeting yesterday. And I want to also remind everybody the Alliance Against Family Violence is having a contactless barbecue at Haymarket Square this weekend. It's Saturday from, when is the time of that? You have to buy your tickets in advance. You can get a hold of Stan Cherry, or you can buy them off their Facebook or any board member. And it'd be Saturday. I don't have the time of that. Does anyone know the time of the Alliance? Is it like from 4 to 6 or something?
I saw it on Facebook. I don't remember the time.
Yeah. Well, I encourage everyone to support the Alliance. They're really doing a great job. I mean,
Overwhelmed.
The board members and of course Stan Cherry, they all stepped up and got that thing up and running good now. So, but anyway, look up on their Facebook. But I encourage everyone to do that to support the Alliance. And also, Mark, you had mentioned in your weekly report, I believe we got a dividend from our insurer, from Carrot.
Yes.
So we got like $37,000 dividend.
Yeah, that's our work comp.
Yeah.
Annually, they meet to review premiums versus claims and I guess deposits over and above what their forecast is, and then they agree to refund a portion of that money. They're a very, very, very conservative group. Getting them to release any funds is difficult. So we were happy that we are getting a dividend. It's not that they get to use the money on something else. They just like to hold it in reserve just in case rainy day funds. But they've refunded 25% of the funds they have in excess of what their targeted deposits were. So they're still pretty healthy.
Mr. Van Paris?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I used to be the Carrot representative for the county. I'd like to compliment Fran for being your representative. She does an excellent job. And I will use a different word than Mr. LOUGHRY used. You have to pry the money out of these people. The last meeting I went to, an industry representative, the insurance industry representative, specifically with respect to workers' compensation pools, stated that you should have 150% of your estimated annual payouts in reserves. Carrot has roughly 300+% in reserves. And if I could just toss out there to you, this is your money they're holding. Mm-hmm. At such time as next year as the dividend apportionment approaches, I would strongly urge this board to take a position that Carrot either release those funds or that this board look at alternatives for workers' compensation insurance, because they're roughly, by my estimate, sitting on well in excess of $100,000 of your money.
Okay. All right. I agree. Fran Kepler does a great job on this, taking this over. I remember when she took it over. But to get a dividend, or our employees are also doing a great job on keeping our work comp claims down. So, anybody else have anything to report on?
Yes, this is Commissioner KAAZ.
Okay, go ahead.
I participated in the Workforce Partnership CEO meeting yesterday, and they've got a lot of grants out there for funding for different programs and projects for unemployment and training of people. And one of the things that I think that we need to look at or consider is that the forecast for post-COVID is that a lot of traditional jobs are not going to come back, but that they're forecasting that there's going to be an increase in the demand for computerized just about everything in robotics. And so they have some grants out there that they're expecting to hear back this week that are going to assist in providing training for individuals wanting to pursue careers in those fields. And they've received some additional grant funding for the older population, 55 and over, to receive some retraining in new careers. So I just wanted to make sure that we're aware that the pre-COVID versus post-COVID employment, it looks like there's going to be some changes in what types of jobs and the demand for what types of positions. And they don't expect for a lot of the hospitality and industry and entertainment industry positions to completely recover.
Probably not for a while. So, yeah, everything has changed a lot. And who knew Jeff and I were in the older population? So, anything else, Commissioner KAAZ?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. And if we don't have any further business, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Voting.
Aye.
Adjourn. And we're going to begin our work session.
Commissioner Cosmo, sorry.
All right. Thank you.